It's me, Holly, and Colby, who's a bit concerned because there's people walking around outside. So we might get a few barks, but we'll see. So I just wanted to have a quick chat today about ideas for things that you can do if your dog is somewhat reluctant to eat. You would think that eating reliably would be one of the things that we could count on our dogs to do. And yet you would be surprised how many dogs are really reluctant eaters. I never expected to have a dog that didn't just yum down whatever I put in front of them. All my old dogs did. If your dog won't eat, it's not a moral failing on your part or your dog's part. Anyway, here are a few suggestions so that if your dog's a reluctant eater, you can try a few of these things and see if they help your dog to eat. If your dog is consistently reluctant to eat, is losing weight, or has a sudden change in appetite, the first thing that you need to do is to go and see your vet and just rule out any medical reasons for what's happening. An injury to the mouth or damage to a tooth, digestion problems, being in pain, being very anxious or stressed. So if you've ruled out all that and your dog's still not keen on eating, here are a few ideas. With Colby, when he was younger, he was a little bit afraid of the rubbish bins in the kitchen. I don't know if it's because the pop-up lids banged a little bit or because they were shiny, but he was a bit nervous of them. So if I put his food dish anywhere near the bins, he was tense and not wanting to eat there. But I would suggest finding somewhere as peaceful and quiet and undisturbed as possible. That could be in your dog's crate if your dog's crate trained. But if not, just somewhere nice, quiet and peaceful where your dog can be uninterrupted. You might have noticed that a lot of dogs will often do this thing where you give them their dish of kibble and they take the food out of the dish, drop it onto the floor and eat it there. And it seems like a very confusing way of behaving. Do they just want to make a mess? What are they doing? If you put food in a dish with raised edges, you're blocking the dog's vision and the dog doesn't feel secure enough to eat like that. So would prefer to take the food out of the dish and eat it from the floor. So another thing that you can try to do is to give them a flat dish, like a plate, so that it doesn't interfere with their vision. Something that I did yesterday, because Colby's been a bit reluctant to eat again recently, is I had lasagna for tea and I actually fed him on the plate that I had eaten the lasagna on. Obviously make sure if you do this that only something dog safe has been on the plate, but because there was a little bit of lasagna residue on the plate and it smelled like lasagna, I think it encouraged him to eat his dog food off that plate, so that's worth a go. One thing I've found works really well with Colby is it's almost like sometimes when he approaches his food he doesn't fancy it. But once he's had a few mouthfuls, it gets his appetite flowing. So I'll make it more interesting. He's got, hang on, I'll just grab it. Okay. What he's got is this, which is made by this company, Tug Enough. And this is called the Clam. It's got Velcro. And you can open it up and you put the treat inside. And then you can either throw it or you can hide it. And your dog will get it. You can open it up and get the treat out. Well, Colby absolutely loves any finding games, so this is really up his street. So I'll cut his dinner into small pieces and I'll put each morsel in there and either throw it or hide it for him. And once we've done that just a handful of times, and he'll happily eat the rest of his dinner off his plate. Colby will not eat kibble out of a dish. He thinks it's the most boring thing ever. He'll only eat wet food out of a dish. But I've got this, which is the Orby Snoop, and you put your kibble inside here and it's sort of rubbery and he has to throw it around in order to bounce the kibble out of it, and he will eat kibble out of there as well. It doesn't have to be those particular toys, but if there's a treat dispensing toy that your dog is interested in, then totally go for it. He'll also go mad if you throw bits of food in the grass so that he can find them, locate them, eat them. So that's another good way to feed him that keeps him interested. We do that sometimes in the back garden But we'll do it in the park as well if it's quiet and there's no other dogs around. Slight problem with that is sometimes we do attract quite a few crows in the park. It's all enrichment because Colby gets to chase the crows off as well, so I don't want to say two birds with one stone when we're talking about crows because it sounds a bit cruel, but it does fulfill two tasks at once. You can sit with your dog and hand feed them. I know there's a lot of people who might say, oh, you're spoiling your dog, but sometimes it's what you've got to do. And it's not just little dogs either. I used to work with an absolutely massive German Shepherd, and when he was a puppy, he was a really poor eater. He wouldn't eat much at all, and we had to flick kibble along the floor, roll it, and he would run after it and catch it and eat it. And that was the only way that we could really get him to eat anything. But he grew into this huge, massive German Shepherd who was fine eating once he got a bit older. So, you know, it can be worth the payoff. Another really easy way that sometimes encourages dogs to eat is just to heat the food up a little bit. So if it's wet food, just warm it through. It doesn't want to be hot. It only needs to be sort of body heat warm. Be really careful if you do this in the microwave because you can end up with colder spots and then really, really hot spots where your dog can burn its mouth. So if you're doing it in the microwave, blast it for a few seconds, check the temperature and carry on doing that until you are satisfied it's a uniform temperature and your dog's not in any danger. Even if they have kibble, if you just add a little bit of warm water and let that soak a little bit, it softens the kibble, it makes it a little bit warmer, it releases those enticing smells. Dogs don't have as sensitive a sense of taste as you might expect. They do, of course, have a phenomenal sense of smell. Anything you can do to release those delicious scents can't do any harm. I wouldn't mix things up too much regarding flavour and toppers. I know some people swear by it, but I think you're better finding one or two flavours that your dog seems to prefer the most and sticking with those. If you mix things up too much or they're getting too many treats or too much human food, they can prefer that much more and then they end up holding out for that. And I think that's one of the problems we've had with Colby. He wants to eat human food and treats and his own food seems a bit boring. Experiment more with texture than with flavour to find out what your dog likes. And just like humans, dogs might have certain textures that they prefer and certain textures that they don't like so much, might gross them out a bit. Colby prefers wet food to kibble, so that's what we tend to go for. Try to keep snacks to a minimum. I know this can be a problem, especially if you have a small dog, if you're using treats to train with. But you really only need tiny, tiny little treats. I sometimes get the little liver treats, which are really dry and chalky looking, but dogs seem to really enjoy them and they're pretty low in calories. But yeah, you only need tiny treats. Take that out of their food allowance. Or if your dog likes their food enough to accept that as a treat for training, if that's high value enough to your dog, because some dogs will just take kibble and be like, yum, then you can do that. I bought some, hang on, I'll go and get them. I bought some of these from Amazon and they're little silicone squeezy bottles. Because Colby likes wet food and not kibble, I thought I could put his wet food in there, or raw food. If you feed your dog raw, this is another way to do it. And then you can squidge it out as a little treat and you know he's still getting his dinner allowance and not extra snacks which are replacing that and probably aren't as well balanced. It's often a good idea to feed your dog after a walk so that they've built up a bit of an appetite. Let them calm down a little bit. Some dogs are still quite aroused from the walk and so they might not be particularly focused on their foods. Once they've settled down, that's a good time to feed. It helps Colby's appetite if I feed him after I've had my main meal. Now that used to be the advice, didn't it, to eat before your dog so that you were reinforcing your position as pack leader, but that's not why this is working. This is because if he gets to see me eating and smell my food, it just makes him quite hungry and he's more inclined to eat his dinner afterwards. And you can also ramp this up a bit by making it really clear that you don't want your dog to have your dinner. You can even pretend that you don't want them to have their food and do a bit of reverse psychology. If you put your dog's food down and your dog doesn't eat it within, say, 10 or 15 minutes or so, pick it up, wrap it up to keep it fresh, wait a while, and then put it down again after a couple of hours. If you leave the food down all the time so that the dog has access to it, not only will the food spoil a bit if it's fresher food, there's less motivation for your dog to eat it because he knows it's always going to be there. Now, you should be washing your dog's dishes every day to make sure there's no harmful buildup of bacteria. That's just good practice. But as we know, dogs are smell superstars. They can pick up the faintest traces of things. For that reason, you have to be really careful to rinse your dog's dishes super well. Because if there's only even the faintest trace of dish detergent left on the dishes, that can be really off-putting to dogs. My final tip is don't feed your dog after midnight because it will turn into a gremlin. No, wait, that's Mogwai, don't worry. Is your dog a reluctant eater? Have you found any hacks or tips that have helped your dog to improve their appetite and to eat more reliably? If you have, let us know because we want to know. We're here to help each other. We're dog owners learning together. So drop me a line in the comments and Colby agrees. Do you know what he's doing? He's trying to bury his Chewy in the bed. You funny bunny.